Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I have 2:45 on my end, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm super excited to be here with everybody today to present some pieces around addressing the essentials, because at this point, as we're making our way into the school year, we certainly are anticipating a lot, especially with returning to school, whether that's physically returning or virtually returning, and then also thinking about some of the instructional implications that are going to follow as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. If for some reason at any point in time you can't see what I'm sharing, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself, raise your hand, throw something in the chat. We are going to be doing some pretty interactive things during the presentation. We will be using the chat right at the beginning, and then we're also going to be using our breakout rooms as well towards the end of our session, and we're going to do just a really brief jigsaw on some of the pieces that we're going to be seeing today. So just wanted to keep everybody in the loop with that. If we have a lower number of participants by the time we get to the breakout rooms, I might have to just restructure a couple of things, and I'll just kind of revamp the slides, but pretty flexible on this end. So again, really excited to be here to work with everybody this afternoon. Again, if you have a question at any point in time, feel free to throw something into the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself, and we can certainly answer those questions for you. So today's presentation is on addressing the essentials. So of course, with COVID taking over our lives during mid-March and currently up to currently, we are thinking about what are the educational, the instructional, the teaching, the learning implications that come along with this particular pandemic and being out of school since mid-March. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those pieces today as we move along. So I know many of you have been on pretty much all day for the first day of our 3-day summer institute here with our Ed Service Division and our tax staff here at the IU. But just again, want to welcome everybody. I know you're making it to the last session of the day, which is great. It's been a really long, awesome day. I've heard some great things so far around the division and around the folks that are participating. So just want to do a quick introduction here. My name is Charlie Travato. I'm a professional development specialist on our leadership team here in the Ed Services Division at the IU. Just a little bit of a background. My career started up in Berks County when I was at Wilson High School in the Wilson School District. I taught math at the high school in an integrated STEM program, and then went from the classroom right into administration at the IU at more of a county level, where I was overseeing all of the STEM programming for those 18 school districts and 70 non-public schools, and then made my way down here to the Ed Services Division at IU 12, working on a bunch of things from data to school improvement, curriculum, math, etc. You name it, I'm sure my hat is on that initiative. So again, really excited to be here with everybody this afternoon. So I'm sure you've seen or heard from a lot of our folks within our division, but just wanted to throw this out there on our slide deck. If for some reason you ever need to get in touch with any of us, I did want to include our division leadership and also the folks that are on our staff as well in Ed Services. So you've probably seen this in a lot of webinars today, but just wanted to make sure that everybody was recalibrated around this after taking a quick break. But just some meeting norms. Of course, engagement is our priority here, whether we're physically together or we're virtually together. And engagement looks different for everybody. So if you feel more comfortable throwing something into the chat, doing a private message, a message to everybody, feel free to go ahead and do that. Or again, you can unmute yourself and ask that question. Of course, we always want to put in here that we want to honor all perspectives and assume good intentions from everyone that's on the call today as well. The Act 48 piece here is going to be awarded upon the completion of the evaluation for the 3-day institute, and this is going to be due by the close of business on July 31st. So you have until basically the end of the week to go ahead and fill out your evaluations for the sessions that you've attended over the course of the 3-day institute to receive your Act 48 hours. So just want to go over our objectives for today. We're going to go ahead and discuss the instructional considerations and prioritization of our content. for the 2021 school year. We're also going to review some resources to help audit our current math curriculum. Now, this particular presentation is focused on math. However, the resources that I'm sharing also include ELA resources as well for our instructional considerations piece. So just keeping that in mind, the pieces that we're talking about and we're going to go through today are specific to math. However, we can also transfer that over into ELA as well for my folks on the call that aren't just heavy in math, but also are looking for more of an ELA perspective as well. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we're reviewing our strategies for how to effectively and equitably address some of these unfinished learning pieces after engaging in our distance learning back in the spring. So I just, again, want to welcome everybody to this upcoming school year, which we all are thinking to ourselves, what is this school year going to look like, right? So I found this from one of the resources that we're going to present today, and I thought that it was pretty appropriate for the work that we're going to be engaging with over the next hour or so. But for the 2021 school year, the prioritization of grade level mathematical concepts combined with some type of incorporation of prior grade knowledge and skills will be the essential piece to supporting all of our students in meeting grade level expectations. So when we think about this, it's not just going to be about what's in our 7th grade math curriculum or what we've taught before in our 7th grade math curriculum. It's really going to be a lift from knowing your curriculum and also knowing the vertical pieces. So of course, where are our kids coming in terms of these gaps that they potentially could have, or the curriculum that they've been engaging with for about 3/4 of the year last year, but then also they've been engaging in some type of content, whether it was enrichment or review and then planned instruction, or it was planned instruction the entire time from mid-March to probably the end of May, beginning of June. So keeping those pieces in mind, we're going to kind of press forward here. So when we think about this, the question that really comes up is, what do we need to teach to ensure that the essential content is being covered regardless of the physicality of classrooms? So regardless if we're going to be in a virtual environment for a good part of the year, for a small portion, for the entire year, or we're actually going to go back physically to the classroom, what do we need to teach to ensure that our kids are going to be on grade level, or we're doing everything that we can to ensure that our kids are going to be on grade level moving forward? So what I'm going to ask everybody to do, this is kind of our first interactive piece. I'm going to throw up a couple of questions. And if you would just not mind at all, just throwing a couple things into the chat around this. I'll put all of the questions up and you can kind of answer as you go. But I want you to start to think about, what is a guaranteed curriculum? What is a viable curriculum? And what is the difference between a focus standard and an important standard? And once we have some of those answers, just food for thought on my end, we'll go ahead and we'll continue to jump into some of the pieces that we're working with today. So from your perspective, what do you feel is a guaranteed curriculum? What do you feel is a viable curriculum? And what do you feel is the difference between a focus standard and an important standard? So I'll give everybody a second to just hit that chat feature and start to include some of the pieces answer-wise into the chat for me. So we have a couple of pieces coming in right now through our chat. Looking at the guaranteed curriculum question, we have that all students have the opportunity to learn and have the opportunity to learn the curriculum that's being written. And then the other piece around the guaranteed curriculum is it should be evidence-based and available to all students, no matter how we are interacting with them, how far we go back, regardless of the potential learning loss, etc. So those pieces are absolutely spot on here. Open to all students. The important standards, what students need in daily living skills or for everyday life, and the focus is going to be written in the state standards. The other piece around important standards is that skill, again, that's based on everyday life or communication pieces. Thanks, Elisa. So feel free to throw your, if you haven't gotten a chance to finish typing yours in, I'm just going to kind of keep track on my one of 3 screens here in my office. So feel free to throw something into the chat if you haven't finished typing, which is totally cool. But what we're seeing here is kind of a lot of what we already know about what it means to have a guaranteed and viable curriculum is really around this piece that all students have an equal opportunity to learn. So what is our curriculum? So our curriculum, just the real quick and dirty here, is that it's a plan for what learners should be able to accomplish with learned content. And of course, we have multiple curriculums that we have. Of course, the 2 biggest ones that we can think of is our written curriculum and our taught curriculum. Our taught curriculum should really be implemented with fidelity if we have a properly written curriculum. So keeping that in mind, the standards, what I often hear when I go into schools and work with teachers, is that the standards are our curriculum, and that couldn't be any further from the truth. Now, our standards are going to define what students are expected to know, understand, and be able to do, not how the teachers should be teaching. So really, the standards need to be complemented by our curriculum. And this curriculum needs to be a well-developed, content-rich curriculum that is guaranteed and viable. So a lot of you put some really great answers into the chat around what is a guaranteed curriculum. So the guaranteed curriculum piece is, are we providing all students the opportunity to learn, regardless of background, regardless of demographic, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of disability, etc. The other piece here is around this whole viable curriculum, which is this necessity to have the time to ensure that we're going to have access across the curriculum. So as we think about these 2 pieces moving forward, definitely want to continue to keep in the back of our mind, is our curriculum that we have that we're going to instruct on upcoming in the 2021 school year, is it guaranteed and is it viable? So of course, our curriculum, just a quick snapshot, is what we need to know, understand, and be able to do to, for example, build a house. These are all of these kind of steps here, but the standards are going to act more like our code of conduct here. So what are the codes that we're going to be working on and relying on as we move into the building of this curriculum? So I thought this was really interesting for those of you that are on the call that haven't seen some of these statistics that have come out of the mid-continent research for education and learning organization back in the 90s. Marzano did a study and wrote a really awesome book and included some of these statistics in there. And I thought it was really important to share that, especially thinking about today, what is essential and what's not essential. So I'm just going to kind of fly through these stats, but I thought they were really interesting for those that might not be familiar with them. So MCREL did this audit of K-12 schools and the time that they were spending on their content back in the 90s. So they looked at different state standards, national standards. They ended up coming up with about 200 standards and about roughly 3,000 benchmarks that they were looking at. And what they ended up finding regarding the time is that, of course, the school year is 180 days on average. There was an average about 5.6 hours in a day. So in total, we were looking at about a little over 13,000 hours that students would be enrolled in K-12 education. But what they were finding is that instructionally, the only instructional time we were having in schools was anywhere between 21% of the time was based on instruction or dedicated to instruction, all the way up to the high end, about 70% of the school time was dedicated to instruction. So what they ended up finding on the higher end was there was only about 9,000 hours to execute instruction within the K-12 system. So what you were looking at on average, just doing a little bit of quick math, was roughly about a little less than 4 hours a day dedicated to instruction. And of course, this had to do with, interruptions, assemblies, fire drills, lockout drills, etc. So they were looking at about a little less than 4 hours a day. So the question that came up when they were doing this was, can 200 standards and over 3,000 benchmarks be taught in this time? And I think all of us, without doing any of the crazy math, could say absolutely not, right? This is not feasible for us to try to get all of this done in about little less than 4 hours a day over the course of these 13 years in education. So really the total time that it would take, that they estimated based on their research, was a little bit more than 15,000 hours. So it would actually take our kids up to about grade 20 to 21 in order to cover all of these standards. Now, we're thinking about that through the lens of the 1990s. So flash forward to where we are now, we probably roughly have about 200 or so standards that need to be covered K to 12. And if we don't, and it's pared down a little bit, the depth and the breadth that we have to go to could certainly equate to having to execute those 200 standards, or the expectation that we would execute those 200 standards over the course of our 13 years. So the $1 million question that I keep getting at this point, whenever I'm working with teachers or working with administrators, is, for example, I teach 4th grade, right? Does that mean that I have to go back and teach 3rd grade content or my 3rd grade curriculum in my school or in the district to make up for all of this lost ground that we have to cover from mid-March all the way to where our kids are going to be coming into school? And of course, wish I can play Bill Murray right now in Groundhog Day, but this is the question that I keep getting and getting and getting. And I feel like I kind of keep waking up in this night, or I keep entering this nightmare and I can't wake up from it, because a 4th grade teacher is hired to teach 4th grade content. They're not hired to teach 3rd grade content. Their priority, their job when it comes to the kids that are sitting in front of them, is to execute 4th grade content and their 4th grade curriculum. Now, what they do with that information that they're gathering from their students through data, through prior knowledge, through prior years data, is exactly what we want to do to help support the work of the 4th grade curriculum. So I'm using 4th grade just as an example, but we can use this across K to 12. So when we think about what our teachers were hired to do, our teachers were hired to teach and execute the curriculum and the content in the grade level that they were hired, or they're currently placed in. So at no point in time do our teachers need to feel like they need to go backwards and reteach and forego the current curriculum, because it's only going to put them further behind. So when we think about this, how do we think about the pieces of the puzzle that are kind of in place or have been in place from prior grade levels, using current data or data from the spring or from the middle of the year to help drive some of the gaps that we need to close and address within our instruction? So Marzano actually went through, when he was doing this research and wrote this book, he came up with 5 different action steps. And just to kind of summarize these action steps, he looked at identifying essential content, ensuring essential content was going to be taught during the allotted instructional time, sequencing and organizing essential content, ensuring teachers address the essential content, and then of course the last one was to make sure that that instructional time is available from more of that viable standpoint. But when I look at this, I hope that it stands out just as it stands out to me when I think about the themes. The themes in these action steps are really all around essential content and thinking to ourselves, what is essential here? So when we think about everything that we've been engaged with over the last few months, is there a silver lining to this? Is there a silver lining to not trying to shove 10 pounds of you know what into a 5-pound bag, right? And start to think about, do we prioritize what we really need to be instructing on over the next school year to ensure that our students are not just making up for lost ground, but also thinking about what is going to be the most important content for them to take away from this upcoming grade level that they're going to be engaged with. So whenever we think about these pieces, we need to start with the goal or start with the end in mind. So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a taste of kind of how we kind of go through our curriculum process and our curriculum auditing process here in our division. One of the things we do when we start to unpack curriculum is to dig into, well, what are our long-term transfer goals? What has PDE kind of set out from a state perspective that we should be getting our students to a point by the time they hit 12th grade, leave 12th grade and move on to post-secondary life? What should they be proficient in? And what goals should we be reaching for them? So if you've never seen the long-term transfer goals specifically for math, since we're going to be talking about math, I would actually encourage you to take a look at our curriculum framework that we have on PDE's website. And you have access to this slide deck on the spreadsheet for day one. So you can certainly click on our curriculum framework that we have from PDE to look at some of those higher level big ideas and essential questions, but also look at what are our long-term transfer goals? What do we need to make sure we're ensuring our students are getting from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade to be successful in post-secondary life? And I'll be honest with you, to sum them up, it's actually a mashup. There's 5 different ones, and it's a mashup of our 8 standards of mathematical practice. So I would encourage you to take a look at what PDE has set as our long-term transfer goals with regards to our curriculum. And of course, when we look at our long-term transfer goals, our big ideas and our essential questions in math, we have it broken into our standards, and then our standards are bucketed into these 4 reporting categories: numbers and operations, algebraic concepts, geometry, and measurement data and probability. So when we think about those pieces, the first thing that we usually take our teachers and our administrators through is digging into some of the instructional frameworks. So looking at our course modules by grade levels. So if you're going to prioritize anything right now, what I would actually suggest folks do is take a look at our instructional frameworks that are available for free on the PDE website, PDE SAS website, because those modules are already built for us. They're built and they have focus standards and important standards already in there. So when we talk about best practice, that best practice is already living on PDE SAS, and it's free and available to all of the educators and administrators and paraprofessionals across the state. So, of course, these instructional frameworks are optional, but if we're really trying to get into the nitty-gritty of what in our curriculum we should be prioritizing in terms of a focus standard versus an important standard based on all of these standards that we're expected to cover, this is a really great place to start, because it's going to start to laser focus us best practice wise into any given school year. What should we really be focusing in on during the course of that particular curriculum for that grade level or that course? The other piece that we can take a look at is start to organize a scope and sequence. So looking K to 12 or K to our trigger courses in high school for math, we can start to list out the specific standards that we need to meet, and when are we actually going through and meeting those standards across the course of the school year. Now, again, I'm talking best practice, right? So we should be kind of thinking about this in general, but this is a really great time for us to have this discussion because of the world that we're living in right now, and start to think about what our prioritization is going to look like moving into next school year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here, and what I'd like everybody to do, and I'll drop this grade level summary in the chat for everybody if you don't have access to the PowerPoint right now or the Google slideshow. What I'm going to ask everybody to do is take about 2 to 3 minutes, and what I'd like you to do is you can choose any of the grade levels that you teach. So if you teach multiple grade levels, feel free to choose one, or courses. If you don't teach a specific grade level and you're an administrator on the call, you can certainly just choose one to pick. But of course, if you teach 4th grade, you're going to go ahead and grab the 4th grade summary. But what I'd like you to do is to review the high level grade level summary that's going to be on this document that I'll put in the chat for everybody. And I'd also like you to just take a couple of minutes to reflect And compared to the grade level summary that you're going to see, is this what I'm planning on providing my students during the 2021 school year? So again, this is a high level grade level summary that you're going to be taking a look at. But what I'd like you to do is start to think about, is this something that I'm thinking about offering my students come the beginning of the 2021 school year? So I just went ahead and dropped that link in the chat, and I'll pull it up so you can see what it looks like as well. But this is the math grade level summary that's available to everybody for free on the PDE SAS website. So again, feel free to just kind of pause, take about a minute or two just to read through the grade level that you teach. If you teach multiple grade levels, feel free to choose one of the grade levels. If you do not teach a grade level, feel free to just pick a grade level and just see, is this something that we would expect to see from our teachers if we're an administrator walking into that classroom or popping into a Zoom or Google Meet. And if you are a grade level / classroom teacher, feel free to start to think about to yourself, is this what I'm planning on providing my students during the 2021 school year? So as we start to think about the prioritization here, is this what we're prioritizing in terms of our curriculum? So I'll kind of pause there and give everybody about a minute or two just to kind of reflect on some of those pieces. Give everybody about another minute just to kind of finish reading through. And again, we're reflecting on this particular question that we have here. Okay, so I'm not going to ask for everybody to share up because we are going to do a breakout room in just a little bit, and we'll get together specifically for specific grade levels, and you can certainly discuss these pieces as well during that breakout session. But for right now, I just kind of wanted you to see from a higher level perspective, what is the grade level summary pre-K all the way up to those high school courses that are our trigger courses, or we're supposed to be our trigger courses with geometry and algebra 2. But looking at those from a higher level perspective and thinking about what should I be getting my students prepared for to be ready to move on to the next grade or course level by the end of that particular grade or course level. So as you're thinking about planning for next year, whether you're an administrator, a teacher, a para, another support staff, a co-teacher, etc., starting to think about, are these the pieces that I'm kind of laying the groundwork for, so to speak, to kind of build this house that we're going to be kind of tackling over the next school year. The other piece that we have, and I mentioned the instructional frameworks on SAS, the other piece, if you aren't familiar with this, and this is interactive, so on the slideshow, you can certainly click anywhere on this picture and it will bring you out to the PDE SAS page. But Pennsylvania, when the PA core standards were rolled out, back in like 2013, 2014, this curriculum map was adopted from Engage New York, which really looks at the specific modules that I was mentioning under those instructional frameworks and what the sequence of those modules would look like. So this is another great place, resource-wise, to go and take a look at some of the prioritization that we can expect for that particular grade level or course in math. And of course, the same thing exists for ELA as well. So if you're interested, it is color-coded specifically for math. And that color coding key, again, goes along with those 4 different reporting categories that I mentioned previously. So as we conduct normal business, right, everything that I have kind of shared with you is probably not earth-shattering information. It's probably things that we've been either engaged with or would typically engage with if we were conducting normal business, right? And of course, the 2021 school year is not going to be a normal business. It's not going to be conducted in normal business hours even for some of us. So when we think about our normal business and conducting what we typically would think about as normal business, of course, we can jump out and take a look at those instructional frameworks, look at what concepts and competencies we should be engaging our students with, what are the focus standards, the important standards, et cetera. But we can also make use of the SAS assessment builder as well. So when we start thinking about our essential standards, we might start thinking about how do we restructure our assessments, and then how do we check for our understanding as well from our students. So there is, of course, the assessment builder on SAS that I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of. And again, this slide is also interactive. So if you click anywhere up here on the instructional frameworks piece, that will jump you out right into the instructional frameworks format, that exact web page on SAS. And same thing with the assessment builder. You can search by standards and by eligible content once we start to think about what are our essential standards that we want to focus on, and of course what eligible content are tied to them. And then we can also develop this new check for understandings, and then of course we can start to track some of those results all within the context of the PDE SAS website. So if you haven't gotten a chance to kind of mess around with some of those pieces, absolutely, by all means, I would suggest going ahead and taking a look at some of those and exploring those resources. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, with regards to the essential standards that we should really be considering. And there have been a lot of resources that have come out around instruction, around planning for next year. And I want to share a couple of them with you. Of course, Pennsylvania was kind of going back and forth when we were thinking about, do we adopt the national core? Do we not adopt the national core? And of course, in Pennsylvania, we had to come up with our own PA core standards when we rolled out the PA core standards. So I will say they align very nicely with the national core. So everything that I'm going to share with you, we can certainly trace back to the Pennsylvania core. But these resources are specific to the national core. And again, I'll kind of just mention the last resource that's on this page is I do have a crosswalk looking at the Pennsylvania core standards and the Common Core state standards as well. So if you're looking at these essential standards that we're going to dig into this afternoon in our breakout sessions and want to look at them alongside the Pennsylvania core standards and see which ones line up with the Pennsylvania core standards, I would actually encourage you to go to the PA core / Common Core state standards side-by-side comparison, because that's going to be extremely helpful as you're trying to map some of the national core stuff that we're going to take a look at for instructional implications and essential content-wise back to where does it map in PA core. So if you've never been to the Achieve the Core website, it's a phenomenal resource for free resources relative to lesson planning, assessments, different class activities that have to do with anything related to the Common Core, any of our subject areas that are related to the Common Core, you name it, any of those resources are accessible on Achieve the Core's website. The other piece that's on here are the mathematics focus by grade level. And the way these documents are broken down on Achieve the Core's website is by three main areas: the major work of that particular grade level or course, the supporting work of that grade level or course, and the additional work of the grade level or course. And of course, the major work trumps the supporting work, trumps the additional work, as we kind of work through those pieces. But when it comes to looking at the essentials, or what the focus would be by grade level, I'm going to actually bump out and show you what these look like. I did include them in a Google folder for us, so I can certainly share that with you as well. But here's an example. So this bumps you out to Achieve the Core's website, and you're going to see pieces from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade. And if we view this file again is broken into what do we want to focus on in kindergarten. So what are our major clusters standards wise that we want to focus on? What are our supporting clusters? What are our additional clusters? Even further broken down is what are our highlights of the major work. So when we think about what's going on in kindergarten, or what do we want to happen in K-2, what are the biggest pieces to come out of K-2 with regards to math? We can look right over here and see there's been an analysis, a deep analysis of not just the standards, but the work that's being done in kindergarten through 2nd grade. And we're seeing, of course, for example here, the biggest pieces to come out are addition and subtraction. So looking at the concepts of addition and subtraction, the skills, the problem solving, and then of course we're adding in there the place value piece as well. So this is really a nice snapshot for us. Now this again is based on the Common Core, the National Core, but we can certainly map these particular standards back to what we've had written under the Pennsylvania Core. And we can certainly use that side-by-side comparison to help us out. The really nice piece about these documents is regardless if you're in kindergarten or you're in 8th grade documents, it actually shows you what this progression is going to look like, helping to lead our students towards middle school algebra. So what are the pieces that we're working on in kindergarten that are going to help us get to 1st grade material and comprehend 1st grade material? What do we need to do in 8th grade, focusing on working with radical and integer exponents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to help prepare us for that next step in our algebra course once we get to high school? So these are some really awesome documents as we start to thinking about what are the essentials. So looking specifically at more of a granular level, just by looking at these major clusters, and I'm just going to focus on the major clusters here, I have 5 major clusters that I need to focus on in general in terms of the essential content for kindergarten. Again, this is an example for kindergarten, but we can look at them K-8 here on the Achieve the Core website. And then, of course, I just want to mention again what the PA Core / Common Core State Standards side-by-side comparison looks like for everybody. So we have it in 3rd grade here, and we have our PA Core Standard, what the eligible content is going to be in Pennsylvania, and then a side-by-side comparison with the Common Core State Standards. Of course, you're going to see some pieces more on a granular level, looking at all of the eligible content and all of the standards that we're trying to hit in each grade level. Some pieces in Pennsylvania that don't have a direct match to Common Core, and vice versa. We might have some stuff in Common Core that doesn't have a direct match to PA. So this is a really great area for us to kind of look to see what is this comparison between what is Common Core considering essential for next school year, and what are they not considering, quote unquote, as essential, or it might be some supporting or important standards moving forward. So SAP, which is the Student Achievement Partners, which is totally separate from the SAP that we probably know about within our district, the Student Assistance Program, came up with this priority instructional content for ELA and mathematics. as we start to think about and plan for the 2021 school year. And this is kind of where we're going to work the rest of the time together. So they put together this prioritizing content guide, and we're specifically going to look at math. So all of those documents that I just showed to everybody on the Achieve the Core website are being used, but we're going to be looking at the prioritization document. So even paring it down further, there's been a bunch of research coming together and folks coming together to say, out of all of those focus areas, those major clusters, this is exactly where we need to focus on to prioritize the grade level standards in that particular grade level. So here's what we're going to go ahead and do. And I can drop these pieces in the chat for us. But what I have right now is I've assigned folks to these 4 grade levels. And since we only have about 9 folks on the call, I'm actually going to pare it down to 3 just for us to take a look at so we have some richer conversation. So I'm going to change our breakout rooms just slightly, and I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to get rid of 8th grade if this wants to let me escape. So I'm going to get rid of 8th grade for right now. And we're going to just focus on kindergarten, 3rd, and 5th grade. So what I'm going to ask you to do in your breakout groups, I'm going to ask you to review the grade level focus document. So that's the document that I just had pulled up, that kindergarten document from Achieve the Core. You're just going to review the standards that are on there and what the major cluster standards are. And then I'm going to ask you to use the prioritization document that I provided to everybody from SAB that they just came out with. And I listed the pages for us here. So kindergarten is going to be on page 13 through 16. 3rd grade will be page 27 to 31, and 5th grade is going to be 37 to 41. I'm going to ask you to just compare what you're seeing in the kindergarten focus documents to what you're seeing in terms of what should we be prioritizing on our prioritization document. And the same will go for 3rd grade, and will also go through 5th grade. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to discuss and share out these 4 questions. Why were these areas prioritized? Just thinking about them at more of a higher level. Why do you think they were prioritized? What do you think the implications are going to be regarding the instruction, regardless if we're face-to-face or we're virtual? What do you think is significance about this guidance? And then what are your thoughts on using the standards of mathematical practices that you're going to see to address social emotional learning? So I'll go ahead and drop those questions in the chat for everybody just so we have them and you can reference them as you're kind of reading through with your partners in your breakout rooms. I'm also going to include the focus document for us. So you're going to find your grade level in there. And then the prioritization document is another one that you're going to take a look at as well. So I just dropped all of those pieces in the chat for you. So I'm going to break everybody out for probably about 10 minutes or so. And I'm going to have you just kind of read through the focus document and compare those major clusters to the prioritization document based on your particular grade level or content area. So kindergarten, I'm going to dump in what your page should be. 3rd grade, I'm going to dump in what your page is going to be. And 5th grade, I'm going to go ahead and dump in what your page is going to be as well. And you know what, instead of 10 minutes, I'll give everybody about 7, and then we'll just come back and do a quick share out before we kind of wrap up for the afternoon. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some really good discussion when you were taking a look at some of those documents. I'm sorry if it seemed like it was, I might have cut you off maybe mid-sentence. It typically happens when we're on Zoom and your breakout room gets shut off. But what I'd really like to do is just have maybe one person share out. I know we had, I had to adjust a couple of things with third grade, so we really just had a kindergarten and a fifth grade room. So if somebody would just kind of volunteer themselves to unmute from the kindergarten room, just to kind of share out some of the pieces. These were the questions, but really kind of what were you discussing in terms of why do you feel like these areas were prioritized when you were looking at those main essential pieces that were listed within the report? What you feel like the implications were going to be on instruction? What do you feel like was significance about the guidance? And maybe what are some of your thoughts if you got to the SEL piece on using the standards for mathematical practice to address SEL? So if somebody wouldn't mind just unmuting themselves from the kindergarten room and just kind of sharing out what they discussed and found.
So with the recommendations, I was a lot of time not to cut down any time.
We all have excellent wait time as educators. We all know that.
To focus on the names of the numbers, counting and comparing. So more of that basic knowledge that students may not have had any instruction in that coming
Brooke, Chelsea, or Julie, if any one of you are available just to kind of unmute and just discuss kind of what you discussed within your breakout rooms or what you found, just kind of reading through the documents for kindergarten, that would be awesome.
I think Brooke was trying to talk, but I don't know if you can hear her.
No, I can't hear Brooke, but I can hear you.
But I think, and Brooke, jump in if I'm not saying this correctly, but we were talking, we just kind of got started talking because it took us a while to get into the documents.
Okay.
So we were talking about how, like, one of them, it seemed like both were really focused on the development of what numbers are and working with numbers. But then we had noticed one of the documents also talked more about working with shapes. So we were just kind of discussing that, and we really didn't get a lot of time to talk about it before
that's totally
we came
okay.
back.
Nope, I just appreciate you sharing out. And absolutely, like when we think about those pieces, and I'm just going to kind of jump out and showcase this particular area of the document, we're going to see the priority for kindergarten here are addressing these four main standards or these four main clusters. And if you compared this next to your focus document, you're going to see that there is a remaining major cluster that it falls in that focus document, but doesn't fall under this prioritization for the 2021 school year. So when we think about those pieces around numbers and counting, and then we also have some of the pieces around addition and subtraction, they're really going to be the main focus for our kindergarten teachers as priorities or essential content moving into the 2021 school year. Not that numbers 11 through 19 are going to be completely lost and we're not going to touch on them, but when we think about prioritizing, what is something that we cannot reduce any of the time that we spend on within the course of the school year, those 180 days for our kindergartners, those are those four main areas that we really need to focus on. And then, of course, Brooke threw in the chat as well, making sure you're spending time on the names of numbers as well, because some of our kids might not have been exposed to that, prior to kindergarten. That would have been something they would have worked on, halfway through pre-K or, working at home with mom and dad or a guardian. That might just not be something that they had an opportunity to get to because of the disruption in learning. So thank you so much for sharing that. Can I put fifth grade on the spot? Erin, Lisa, or Steph, if you wouldn't mind just unmuting and kind of letting us know what you were chatting about. The three of you ladies, I know we had a short time to talk and dig into some of those docs, but what were some of the pieces that we were kind of working with together?
We actually didn't get time really to talk. I was still reading. I'm sorry. It took me a minute to get into the documents and I was still reading them. And then it came on my screen that it was ending and I was like, oh no. But for me, like what I guess I noticed is, you know, when you're talking about like 8th grade algebra and things like that. And I feel like when you're getting into 5th grade, you're really working in honing in on some of those skills that are going to guide you in the higher level math classes and making sure that you're focusing on those and kind of the reasoning behind why you're doing things. But I didn't get a chance to share that with my group, but that's what my thought process was.
Okay.
And I think the same thing, like I said, I mean, it was a lot to read through and a lot to go through and trying to piece it back and forth between screens. And I actually am on different computers as well, trying to look at different stuff. I think it's just like we learned in the one thing with Sarah, it's like we need to pay attention to the foundational basis. Like fact fluency is so important. And I think a lot of times we negate that to get to, oh, this is the lesson of the day, or this is the intervention of the day, rather than taking that time to do that fact fluency. So I think like the multiplication of the numbers and the fact fluency is so important, but a lot of times we just skip that whole part as a warm up and just go straight to the lessons.
Right, right. Okay, well, I'm sorry that the time was cut short. I wish we had a little bit longer than an hour to kind of dig into some of these documents and, you know, really engage in some deeper conversation. But again, this is really just kind of scratching the surface on some of these pieces related to the essential content as well. So I would actually challenge everybody on the call, you know, once we're off, if this is something that, you know, you're really passionate about, or you're, you know, ready to start to think about what are the essential pieces of the curriculum for next year, I would highly encourage you to really take some time to dig through that particular grade level that you're tasked with teaching for next year, so you can really think about what are the non-negotiables with regards to our curriculum and our content and our standards, and what are some of the pieces, not that we can put on the back burner, but that are important that we could possibly enhance the priority areas for next school year, just to kind of start to think about how do we close some of these achievement gaps that we're going to have from our kids moving forward. The last piece that I wanted to share with everybody came out of the Council of the Great City Schools. This was another recent publication in June, and it really addressed the unfinished learning that happened or took place mid-March to the end of May, early June. So really that last quarter of the school year based on the pandemic. And really the focus of this was really this whole switch from just in time versus just in case learning. So with regards to math, we really need to think about what are the specifics. Do we really need to go reteach fractions with regards to implementing and understanding and analyzing slope? Or what do we need specifically regarding fractions to get our students to understand, and be able to execute slope, et cetera, et cetera. So this whole notion of this just in time versus just in case learning. So when we think about our unfinished learning priorities, and this is our last piece before we wrap up, there were 6 of them here that the report actually kind of took us through and summarized. And I just wanted to pull out a couple of food for thought pieces for us all on the call today. The first one was sticking to grade level content and instructional rigor. So when we think about this, I want you to think about the discussions that you're having with your kids, whether it's physically in class or virtually. What do those scaffolds look like, and providing the scaffolding for our kids? And then what opportunities are we providing to them, whether it's a tiered opportunity, different types of activities, et cetera, that are going to increase instructional rigor for them as well. The second piece was focusing on in-depth instruction or depth of instruction, and not just focusing on the pace of instruction. So what I'm challenging folks to think about here is this whole notion of re-engagement. So how do we re-engage our kids in our learning, or in their learning as a individual, and then also as a community of learners as well. The third piece was the prioritizing content and learning, which we talked a lot about today, but really thinking about holistically, how do we build the understanding for our kids? So thinking about where our students are coming in from and where they're currently where they currently are, and then where they're going to need to go in the future, but really building up the essential foundational understandings for them within the context of that particular course or grade level. The fourth piece is ensuring the inclusion of each and every learner. So thinking about equity, accessibility, and what I would encourage everybody to do is to visit the second and third day of the Summer Institute's calendars, just to take a look at what is available to you regarding accessibility and equity. Identifying and addressing the gaps. So of course, thinking about what those temperature checks are going to be, or I even included an assessment timeline for folks to consider as well. So this is interactive as well for everyone. And then really capitalizing on our commonalities and not our differences. So thinking about vertical alignment wise for a fourth grade teacher, what happened in third grade? So where were our students leaving, or what were we expecting them to leave with in third grade moving into fourth grade as well? So I'm going to kind of jump over the reflections since we're out of time, but your evaluation will be sent to you. So when you think about this, I really hope that this session kind of met your needs and your expectations, but feel free to answer these questions within the context of the evaluation. And then of course, day 2 schedule, since this is our last session for day 1, I would encourage everybody to take a look at day 2 session. It's packed, and so is day 3's as well. But again, would encourage folks coming back tomorrow for the second day of the Summer Institute to take a look at those sessions, because we have some really dynamite ones coming up as well. So with that, I'll just kind of stick around. I know we're right at time, but I do want to thank everybody for participating today. And of course, if you have specific questions, I'll hang out. But thank you so much for participating. And we hope to see you back tomorrow and on Wednesday as well.